Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hi, this is Tammy Patzer, and I'm happy to introduce you to today's guest, Lillian Cauldwell. Lillian wrote Teenagers, a Bewildered Parent's Guide in 1996 in response to too many parents who didn't actually know how to parent their teen without resorting to threats, bribes, and sometimes physical violence. She wanted to prove to parents that there was an alternative way of parenting that actually works. That book is still selling today, and an editor actually suggested to Lillian that she try writing fiction since her stories were so excellent. From there, she went on and wrote an historical science fiction called Sacred Honor, followed by a multicultural paranormal mystery aimed at girls between the ages of 8 and 14. Welcome, Lillian.
Thank you for having me on your show, Tamara.
Tell me a little bit more about your background and go ahead and expand on how you wrote the Teenagers book and your other stories.
Well, first of all, when I was a little girl, I was not encouraged to be a writer. In fact, the only thing I really was encouraged was to finish high school, find myself pinned to a lucky guy, marry him, and then support him in his career thrust to the top. That was the program my parents outlined for me. Unfortunately for everyone concerned, it didn't quite turn out that way. I sort of took a left when I should have taken a right. I married the first guy who asked me out. We lived off the land for 3 years. I had my child way too young, caught him with another woman, left him, and was on my own. That's my background. I really didn't start writing until I was well along in my late 30s, 38, 39. Finally found the man, not a child, the man of my dreams. Married, found myself in Cleveland, Ohio. My kid went to school, my husband went to work, and I was left with 8 hours of sheer boredom. So I decided, well, I used to write poetry when I was a teenager. Let's give it a try. So I went through the list of possible nonfiction publishing companies, crafted some query letters, sent them off, and really didn't think too much about it. And lo and behold, one of them actually replied and said, I really like your idea. If you take the humor out and just write it straightforward, I'll sign you to a contract. So I never was paid so much money for an advance before. And make a long story short, I accepted the contract. Never do that, but I was young and stupid. And I signed the contract, and I really learned how to write under his tutelage. So for that, I have to thank him for. And he also edited the book, and he was the one who read my stories that were based on actual experiences that my son, my teen son, and his friends went through, and he thought they were just awesome. And he says, you really ought to try writing fiction after that, because I really feel that you'll do better that way. Who knew? So after an extensive radio tour, because in those days nothing was virtual, I sold. Eventually, after 3 weeks, the book went into a second printing. So I sold about 10,000 copies within the first 3 months, which I understand back in the 90s wasn't too shabby for somebody who was out of the gate first time. And I learned a lot about writing and marketing and what to say and what not to say. It led to speaking engagements. It led to teaching courses at a local college. The one thing I will warn writers is that after your 15 minutes of fame, there's always a letdown one. Everybody walks away to the next instant wonder that comes up on the scene. Wow. It's called depression. And I learned how to handle that as well. But it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me a lot about my writing. And as a result, I went on the route for conventions, because that's when I started writing my historical science fiction. It's based against the backdrop of the American Revolution. A spy whose family I traced, his descendant lives in New Jersey and he works with computers. But it was interesting talking to him. He was one of these unknown spies that Washington never committed to paper. And from there, I also used a brilliant scientist. He loved mankind. It was people he couldn't get along with. He was the father of physics. His name is Benjamin Thompson, and I wove a story around him with the centerpiece and with the idea that he built a time machine, went back in time, and worked his magic. If you want to know the rest of the book, I suggest you go and buy it. I think you will be intrigued.
I'm intrigued.
How it works out.
So is that available on Amazon?
That is still available on Amazon. It's called Sacred Honor.
Okay, so Sacred Honor is a historical science fiction. I also want you to tell me about your paranormal mystery.
My multicultural. Yes. I wanted to write a book for girls, specifically African American and Hispanic girls, because after talking to several teachers in the elementary school and junior high arena, they informed me there really wasn't any type of role models out of the genre for African Americans and Hispanic preteens. And they said, even though there's Nancy Drew and the Bobbsey twins and a couple of other generic type books, there's nothing really out there for Black kids. And I thought about it, and I contacted some of my son's friends who were teens and African American and Hispanic. And I spoke to them about it, and they gave me their blessing. And I thought, teens are teens. They act the same, they dress the same, they speak the same. The only thing that may be different is perhaps they mature at different levels. And while some of them may be highly sophisticated, their maturity level is probably on the bottom of the ocean, which is where my son's maturity level was. He was quite sophisticated, but when it came to acting his age, well, that's another chapter and verse. So I put together a story. And recently I had interviewed a very well-known children's author. And I thought, well, what the hey? She said if I ever wanted to have her help, I should contact her. And my philosophy is, if you don't do it, then you're the one who's in want. So I emailed her and I asked her if she would be interested in taking a look at what I put together. And I asked her for her sincere feedback. And she said, lo and behold, I would be delighted. So I sent her what I did. She sent it back and says, you're on to something, keep going. And I did. It took a lot of research, a lot of time. It took me about 4 years to write it. The editor is my spouse. He's a former professor at Barnard, and he just loved killing whatever I thought was really poetic and beautiful. He just threw it all out. But he did me a big favor, because when I approached a new publisher to have it done, they said, well, okay, let's take a look at it. And for whatever reason, it never came to pass. So eventually I self-published. And it also did very well. And along the way, I gathered a fan base, not just of preteens, but of their parents and grandparents. In fact, to this day, they're still waiting patiently for book 2, which is the anime mysteries, The 7 Keys of Solomon, which takes place abroad, because I wanted to put my sleuths in the foreign lands and see how they would acclimate and do without any parental authority. So I put them there. And then the 3rd book, My Mother's Keeper, I have drafts and outlines on, but I haven't officially put it together. And recently I received an email from one of them who is a dentist, and he has 2 grandkids. And he says, I'm holding you to your promise of bugging you as to when the next book is going to be put out.
So when is that next book going to be put out?
That's a good question. It's all written. It's all edited. I just haven't had a chance really to put it through anything, through an ebook. I guess I really want to hold out and see if I can get a company to publish it. But I know deep in the heart of Texas, that's not going to happen. And I just really need to put it into a Kindle and stop fussing.
That may be right. I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Since you've had experience with having a publishing company help you publish your book, and you got the big advance and everything, and then you have the experience of being a self-published author. So is there a stigma about self-publishing versus having a publisher today? That's one of my questions. And then I want you to talk about maybe the pros and cons on both sides of that, because I know sometimes having a publisher doesn't always mean that you have to do any less work to promote your own book. So if you can address that, that would be really great.
Absolutely. I'll start from your last question and work myself forward. Just because you sign up with a big publisher, you see a lot of the big publishers saying, oh, sign up for our program and you'll have our name. Well, the name is practically the only thing that you'll have from that large publishing company. Marketing, it's on you. Promoting, it's on you. Do you receive more monies? Well, it depends on your efforts for marketing and promoting, and how industrious you're going to be to get yourself seen and heard. Does it help to be published by the old faithful? Yes, it does, because in the publishing world, despite what they say, getting your book published and put out either in softback or hardback is still a big deal. However, if you read the fine print with many of the large publishing companies, along with the small publishing companies, you have to sell so many ebooks to prove to them that your book is something that they want to invest in. And don't kid yourself. When a major publisher looks at your book, they only see dollar signs. Oh, it helps if you're a good author. But they also look at the marketability and the commerciability of that particular book. Talk to some of the big boys. They'll tell you the same exact thing. They get one contract for the book that's just been accepted. It does not cover any further books in a series. Each book is judged independently. So take note when you start writing, and a company says, we would like it if you have 2 to 3 books. That's right. They want to see whether or not you can continue between the first book, but they also want to see how well your writing holds up in the second and third book, because usually by the second and third book, authors start failing. They use repeat characters. The writing is not exciting. Let's face it, it's very difficult to write distinguishable books separate from each other, but united with a common theme.
Yeah, I imagine that is very difficult. So your experience as an independent publisher, you said that you published the other book independently, and you had good results with that. So can you talk a little more about that?
Well, one of the things I did was I start promoting it a year before it actually came out, or when I thought it would come out. And I wanted the world to know that Lillian Cauldwell was still out there and still still writing, which is very important. You don't want to come across as a one book wonder. It's fine in the 1800s if you just wrote one book. Everybody would accept you and be glorified for the next 50 years. But that doesn't happen anymore in the digital age. Unfortunately, it's what have you done for me lately? So if you want to be an author, you don't have to put out 30 books in 1 year. But at the same time, what I try to do is work on 3 different books during the year. So I have at least one book that makes it out into a final, and then eventually I can publish it, because you don't want people to forget who you are. It's a very fickle market out there because everybody and their mother is now writing because of ebooks. And people think, well, anybody can write a book. And you're right, anybody can. But then the question is, will it sell? So again, it comes back before I even start putting my fingers to the keys is, who is my target audience? What do they want? What do they expect? And please don't tell me that an 8 or 9-year-old is not going to know this, because an 8 or 9-year-old does know it. I went through that stage with my identical twin daughter grandkids, and they did not like Harry Potter. They liked Narnia better. Why? Because Narnia had those cute animals in it. Narnia was where the kids actually had to solve their problems without having a prop like magic to help them. Who would have guessed? When I was 8 years old, I was still reading fairy tales. So things have changed. Kids have changed. If kids are your market, find out what the kids want to read about. Find out what they're interested in. Find out what's going to tantalize them. For example, my kids love puzzles. They love to guess the words. They love to try to put words together when provided with the proper letters. Everything and anything to do with mysteries of finding things, finding the clue, solving it on their own, they love it. So when they were introduced to the anime mysteries, they loved it. You know why? Because I gave them exactly what they wanted. A little bit of history, because they love history. A girl who thought on her feet, who had a 9-year-old, a 9-year-old brother who was a real troublemaker and annoying and got in her way all the time, and a loyal best friend who just happened to be a boy who was beginning to feel his first love, puppy love, towards her, but she didn't want to be encumbered by someone like that. So you have the bickering and the fighting. Grown-ups, that's what kids want. They don't want it fed where you're telling them how it's done. They want to be there figuring out with the heroine just what's going on. Does this make sense? So when I had my kids go to the computer to look up certain keywords, don't you know they went to the computer and looked up the keywords too to see whether or not those keywords actually produce the problem, the solution to the problem?
That sounds like I want to read that book, because it's intriguing. As I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking about the books that I used to read, and I would always imagine what I was, where they were and what they were doing. And I always could see it in my mind. And of course, that is the beauty of reading. Let's talk a little bit about your creative process, because a lot of people, they sit there staring at the blank screen, or they think they have to actually handwrite the book into a notebook. What is your creative process?
My creative process is pretty unusual, but then if you talk to other authors, some of them will admit they do the same thing. First of all, I get an idea, and then I write it down. For example, I came up with an idea for a political thriller. The title, the working title, right now, I have two of them. One of them is Only in America, or the other one may be The War of Words. And it's for a political thriller that I'm doing with two presidential candidates. And I thought about how I would like it to be presented. And I decided that I'm going to have a journalist over in Europe observe the process of two candidates vying for the single prize of becoming president of the United States. And this journalist is going to report to his readers the words, the actions, the body language, everything that they believe will be able to convey what each one of these candidates want the audience to believe in. So when voting day comes, they'll go down to the booth and vote for them. And of course, the highlight of the book is who wins. And that whole process is going to be very much under wraps. What I haven't decided is whether I should have the surprise at the beginning or have this and work backwards, or work forward and have the surprise at the end. But I do know that the world in which these two candidates will be vying to become president of the United States is going to be set 15 years from today. And based on what the global economic, political, trade agreements, the whole 9 yards, all of this will be brought into action, because in reality, what happens in this country will definitely affect the rest of the world.
Wow, that is an intriguing plot line, especially in, right now and to this year. Of course, we're in a presidential election year that is very unique and different. So, fast forward 15 years and who knows?
And who knows? Exactly. And I have to tell you, it was an idea that I came up with 2 months ago. And then I write now on a piece of yellow, small paper. I've written down everything. So you can imagine the words are all juxtaposition and thrown down, and ideas are written on top of things. And I have question marks and the two different topics that these candidates will use as their primary jab towards the voters. And I have everything written down. And now I'm just trying to think what country I'm going to have this journalist coming from to make the report. Yes, it has to be a Western nation, but at the same time, do I want it to make it friendly? Do I want to make it unfriendly? How do I want to handle how these people got to where they are? How much is going to be too much? So I'm still doing that. Basically, for a lot of my books, I already know the ending before I start the beginning of the book. So sometimes I do write my ending first and then go to the beginning. Sometimes I have a pivotal chapter that can go either way, so I put that in. I sometimes write up my content page and use my content page as my outline to progress from chapter to chapter. But nothing is written in concrete. Do I write with pen and paper? Sometimes. I get my best ideas, unfortunately, when I'm driving. For whatever the reason, or I'm doing something with one of the kids and all of a sudden the idea pops into my mind. And I do want to stress that you should always have a little tape recorder with you or a pen and pencil that's tied to each other, so at least you can scribble it down, because I guarantee you when you finally get home, you won't remember it, or you won't remember it word for word the way you originally thought it up. And if you think it makes a difference, it does.
So how long does this entire process typically take you from idea to, say, the end of a first draft?
Anywhere from 1 to 2 years. I'm not a notoriously fast author. I have to admit, I also run an internet talk radio station as well. And even though the two sometimes run parallel together, sometimes at the expense of one, I have to do the other.
Right. Well, I think that's really true for most of us. We often juggle more than one thing. I think that's the nature of the world, especially with electronics and the internet now. It seems like we try to just jam so much into our day, and we really, love what we're doing. So of what you're doing, what do you love the most about the whole process?
The whole process. I think I love the most sitting down in front of the keyboard with the blank screen and having my piano introduction when you start the book. And I was taught you always start in the middle of something that catches the reader's attention almost immediately. And that's what I do. I don't make any assumptions. You don't know this character from hell, and that's fine. But I want you to be involved with them by the time I start my second paragraph.
So you start in the middle of some action so
Yes.
that obviously, you walk, it's as if you're walking into and witnessing this unfold.
Exactly. I mean, there's no beginning when you walk past an office and you hear out of your peripheral ear, I just killed it. And even though you keep on walking forward, your mind says, killed it? Killed what?
Right.
So even though you weren't even part of the conversation, if you have a creative mind like I do, I can make a whole story by the time I reach the end of the passageway.
Yes, because some simple phrase like that could mean many, many things. So Lillian, tell me a little bit more about your radio show and how people can find out more about you.
All right. I own and operate an internet talk radio station, which means that I have hosts who pay for my audience, and I give them a website and I do the promotion and marketing for them, and I connect them to other people. It's called Passionate World Radio Network. You can find me at, of course, https://passionateworldradionetwork.com. If you want to learn more about me, Lillian S. Cauldwell, the best way to do it is either to Google me, and you'll find me dominating the first 10, 15 pages of Google. I've been around for 10 years doing Passionate World Radio Network, and I've been involved in other projects as well. What you do need to know about me is I'm no spring chicken. I started the station when I was in my 50s, mid-50s. I'm now 65. I hope to do this until the day I croak. And you may even hear me croak before I go my way, as they say. I love doing what I do, both with writing and with the station, because I feel that in some small measure, I am helping people achieve their goals and their successes. And if it means to help them to get on the air, for them to be heard because they have something very important to say, then that's what I'll do. To me, it's more important to get voices heard than to interview a celebrity whose voice you probably get tired of hearing anyway.
Thank you. Can you recap the titles of your book where people can find you on Amazon so they know what they're looking for?
The first book, my nonfiction book, is called Teenagers, A Bewildered Parent's Guide. The working title was called Typical Teenage Behavior. Publisher didn't like that, so he went to his title. Second one is called Sacred Honor. And the third one is The Anime Mysteries, The Golden Treasure. which is set in Georgia and also concerns the lost gold of Jefferson Davis.
Oh, that sounds like a really exciting backdrop. There were a lot of really cool mysteries in history that are still unsolved. So that is a really interesting thing. Well, Lillian, I really appreciate all the time you took with me today, and I'll certainly go check out PassionateWorldRadioNetwork.com and also go look for your books on Amazon. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
This is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a great day.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.